were talking earlier, and she said, I feel like in many ways this exonerates Meghan from the accusation that she stirred up all this trouble between them.
Well, Gareth, thank you so much for joining us as always. And, we've been talking, everybody's talking about Prince Harry's book. So what stood out to you the most after you read this? What kind of stayed with you the most?
It's a really good question, I think, because I actually think this is a book almost of three parts. I don't know if anyone else got the impression it was very different. I mean, first of all, the opening, his ghostwriter, J.R. Moringer, about Balmoral deserves so much applause. It's so beautiful. But what really stayed with me was the anger of it. I think there is such a palpable sense of fury. And at times that fury is justified and you're sort of cheering him on. Then there are other times where it felt misapplied. And I think there were times for me where I was a little bit surprised at the way he felt comfortable guessing the motives of people around him. One of the things that stayed with me that I didn't like so much was when he was discussing the sort of conferences with the Fab Four, a moniker he very much rejects. But when his sister-in-law Kate was quiet, Harry is very confident in the book, saying that proved that we were right and she agreed with me. And I thought, I don't really know if it's your place to speculate on what someone else's silence means. It could mean any number of things. It could mean you were right. It could mean she'd given up. It could mean all kinds of things. So I think there were a lot of instances, as I said, of anger. There were a lot of instances of him kind of stepping into other people's privacy in a way that he'd previously really eloquently said he hoped people didn't do for him. So that's what stuck with me.
Yeah, you say that he makes a lot of allegations. He kind of takes a lot of liberties, and he does spill a lot of secrets. What do you think was the most damaging allegation to come out of this book?
For the royals, I think probably the outright accusation that each of the households are leaking stories to the media and playing a game with them. It's dangerous for two reasons. The first is that it strangely undermined his point a little bit about the perniciousness of the tabloid press. It made it more of a complicit, difficult to disentangle relationship. And you then had to question, well, if all the households were doing this, was Diana doing this? Was Charles doing this in the 90s? It made it a bit more difficult to follow what I thought was a really brilliantly put forward point. It also, of course, makes a lot of people question other members of the family. And I think, just from talking to people, there is maybe more of a skepticism about how the monarchy interacts with the media. That it also, to me, Christine, was a bit interesting because I think one of the points that stood out to me was it's almost a strangely monarchist book, which sounds like a bizarre thing to say, considering he attacks so many individual royals. But and first of all, we should be clear, Prince Harry has very firmly answered Tom Bradby in his interviews, I am a monarchist, I want to see the monarchy continuing. In a very strange way, this book reads like a cry for a much more muscular monarchy that has the right to tell the press, you can write this, you can't write that. Obviously, the constitutional implications of that are tricky, but I think there were times in the book where he was saying the monarchy should be allowed to tell the press, I don't want you invading my privacy in this way. And he was pushing back on the idea that people in Britain have a sense that they own the royals and that they should have access to all of their deepest, darkest secrets or even their most mundane private points. So I think the most damaging thing was the allegations about the royals leaking to the media. But I would also say probably one of the most long-term and convincing points he made was about the media pushing an idea that the royals are owned by the media and by the people. So that it's both the most damaging and perhaps one of the more compelling points.
Yeah, and a lot of people are compelled and interested on his relationship with Prince William, obviously, and I think a lot of people are going to be surprised at how deep-rooted this tension was between them, going back, years, pretty much when their mother died. I mean, what kind of stood out to you the most? I mean, we have this physical fight and things like that, but were you surprised at how how deep this issue was between the two of them.
I was surprised. I mean, I think actually one of my a colleague, we were talking earlier, and she said, I feel like in many ways this exonerates Meghan from the accusation that she stirred up all this trouble between them, because it's very clear if you read the book that Prince Harry has been keeping score in his head for decades before he met the future Duchess of Sussex. I'll be honest, that probably was the bit of the book that I didn't warm to the most, simply because, and by the way, it's not that I didn't get the sibling frustration, and there were times where I do think, I can tell you from having written a biography of the Queen Mother, Diana did think that the Queen Mother favoured William. She did think some of the elder generation were showed a bit more favouritism towards William. So it's not totally without foundation, but I have to say, I don't know how sympathetic I was to complaints like, I got the smaller bedroom compared to William, and you think, in a palace. In a palace. It's a cost of living crisis. Like my sympathy's minimal at this stage. In terms of
very far away.
How small was your palace bedroom? And I think to be tracking score of that, 20, 30 years later, that bit didn't work. I think that's probably some of the bits in Britain that have landed least sympathetically.
For more news content and exclusive interviews, make sure to hit the sub, like, and bell button down below and visit usmagazine.com.